I'm now delighted to say that IAB Europe has brought together a panel of industry leaders and experts from its Programmatic Trading Committee to explore the state of the programmatic advertising landscape and ecosystem. Our moderator for this is Lisa, and Lisa is also my longtime colleague at IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee. She's also the Director of Advertiser Solutions for Pubmatic. Now, don't forget you can submit your questions using the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. We'll review the questions and put a selection of them to the panel at the end of the session. But I'm happy to say over to you, Lisa, for this exciting panel.
Thanks so much, David. And thank you, Daniel, for that great presentation. So let's kick straight off. And I wanted to have each panelist introduce themselves and let me know if you agree or disagree with the trends Daniel presented. We assume most of you will agree. So if you do, which stat or fact resonated the most with you? Steve, I'll go over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, and hello everyone. My name is Steve Wing. I work for a company called Magnite. For those of you who aren't familiar with Magnite, we're the largest independent supply-side platform for all channels and formats. So we were originally created combining the reach and scale of Rubicon Project with the connected TV expertise and technology of Talaria. As of last week, when we closed out our acquisition of SpotX, we're absolutely thrilled to have such a talented team join our company. And that helps us on both fronts, both the programmatic reach and scale, as well as video, CTV, expertise and tech. So it's probably, Lisa, no surprise that the stat that's called out, all of it makes sense. I'm never going to not a better than anticipated growth in programmatic advertising. But the stat that probably turned out most for me was around growth around programmatic video. And I think Daniel referenced it around the streaming revolution, which I think everyone's familiar with. But what we saw last year in a change in how consumers consume more content, and specifically on the big screen, has been very profound. And there's lots of research studies that have covered this. We did one across the EU top 5, and it showed that CTV or connected TV, it's mainstream. Most people are watching it weekly. It's changing. There's a preference around streaming that sets it apart from linear. And it's also very open for advertising. So the value exchange that Daniel alluded to in return for reduced cost or a free service. So I would go with that bit for the time being.
Thanks so much, Steve. So Gregor, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Lisa. My name is Gregor Fellner. I'm located here in Hamburg and working for Recruitment Advertising. Rakuten Advertising make all the Rakuten properties available through the programmatic pipes, mainly Rakuten TV, but also Rakuten Viber and Rakuten Wiki. And the most resonating stat that I've seen in Daniel's presentation was actually also the second slide, where programmatic video surpassed other digital media and becoming one of the biggest programmatic channels after social. And I think this is a trend that will prevail. So I can second Stephen on this, but also seeing the identity solutions that are coming up and the activities that all the e-commerce players, and Rakuten is one of them, have deployed over the past month and years. So this is also, of course, speaking from my personal view, something that Rakuten puts in a very good position going forward, as we have a Rakuten ecosystem with a unified ID and a lot of e-commerce data.
Great, thanks, Gregor. Nicola, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicola Bevan. I'm the MD for operations from Xaxis EMEA. So we are GroupM's programmatic arm. So we work and support with great clients across GroupM to deliver great outcomes for clients. So I think, first of all, I wanted to thank Daniel for the presentation. It was really insightful as usual. And I'd agree with all of the themes that he discussed. I think a couple that popped out for me, I think video growth, I think everyone can recognise that from the past year, if not before. One of the pieces that resonate for me is the switch from just focusing on supply chain, but to actually the value chain, because really what's important for clients and what they're looking to achieve is like the business outcomes. So if there's a fee involved and it delivers a superior service, then it's worth paying for if it delivers that outcome. And then I think the other piece as well, which I think Gregor and Steve both mentioned, is I think understanding first-party data is a priority, and it should be for all clients. And I'd really encourage people to be proactive, start testing the new solutions as and when they come available, and just make sure that we're all working towards preparing for that change in the industry.
Thanks so much. And Andreas, last but not least.
Hi everyone, yeah, Andreas Dooley. I head up sales for Oracle Advertising across EMEA. The two main brands, or the two core solutions that sit under that, would be Moat and Moat Measurement. But the area that I focus on specifically is our contextual intelligence products, which are more recognizable as what would be Grapeshot specifically. Yeah, look, I agree with everyone's points as well, and thank you to Daniel again. One interesting thing I thought was actually, after all years in ad tech and media, the funnel was always on a slide, and will that now move to a cylinder? It'd be really interesting. First party for sure. I'm really glad that there was a nod to context somewhere in that presentation. I think there's certainly an interesting piece around diversification of kind of strategy and tactics as we move into the new world. And I think it won't be one particular solution that is the magic formula, but it will be a specific array of solutions that meet people's criteria. The other last piece is just this piece around consumer behavior change, which I think we'll probably get into a little bit in our conversation as well.
Great. Thanks, everyone. We've known that there's been growth this year, but it had started off as a turbulent year with the pandemic and preparing for the new post-third-party cookie era. What are some of the other challenges or barriers you've seen this year, and how have you overcome these? Steve, did you want to start?
I'll kick off. Yeah. So I would just reflect, obviously, I think we'll come on and talk about a world post-party cookie, but I think it's worth just reflecting. It's not a classic headwind because ourselves and so many other companies have achieved such extraordinary things in the last year, but working, onboarding, recruiting, developing culture, building companies, hitting numbers, working with our partners to deliver great outcomes, doing all of that while working from home from over a year, depending on where you are in the world and certainly where you are in different bits of EMEA, I think we shouldn't underestimate how surprising some of the success has been and how amazing lots of teams have responded to it, but also has to look at that as something that's been a challenge in many different areas. And I hope we come to talk a bit more about talent development during that period. I think for me, I'm always looking at turning things into a positive. So again, we'd look at the kind of how do you capitalize on the actual. Daniel showed in his, as usual, excellent presentation, very compelling slides around growth, and the growth specifically around video, but also mentioned the growth in biddable and programmatic CTV, but from a small base. So how do we grow adoption in line with the kind of the changes that we've seen in consumer adoption to enable faster, quicker, larger investments? So I think tackling issues such as fragmentation, measurement, attribution to help solve some of that, to help advertising grow, investment in line with those changes, has been a big part of this year, both as an individual company, but collectively as an industry. And I think that allows us the opportunity to try and take what is a unique market and give it the justice in terms of the opportunity that it presents to us. And just a quick shout out to the IAB Europe while I'm here, because that would make sense. If you are interested in the unique characteristics of connected TV and EMEA specifically, so opportunities, challenges, market constituents, the guide that came out last week, the IAB Guide to Programmatic Opportunity in CTV, which many people on this panel have contributed to, it's really good. So that'd be me. I think let's not underestimate the impact on people. I think it's been fantastic, but for me, how do we turn some of the challenges and obstacles to investment in one of the newest and fastest growing sectors of our market?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I suppose I can add to some of that. I would also say that the last year, midst of pandemic, there's been just general unpredictability as well for planning and activation of programmatic. And I think what was easily predictable, forecastable yesterday went out of the window. So general planning cycles and execution. When you think in the midst of a pandemic, we left Europe, there was a US presidential election, social and racial movements as well, like Black Lives Matter, an increase in deep fakes, in fake news, and just rapidly changing kind of news cycles. I think that's definitely one piece. The second would be add that to the fact that everyone has been at home, we've been in lockdown, consumer behavior, and I think Daniel's kind of suggested some of that as well, is consumer behavior has got turned upside down too, which has just meant the usual ways that clients, advertisers, agencies would go about their operations to target consumers had to be reinvented on the spot. I think that was certainly a challenge and a flag for sure. And that's a nod to e-commerce too, rise to e-commerce that we saw from Daniel. And then lastly, it's the bedding in of legislation. I think we've really seen the maturity of kind of GDPR coming through and privacy first coming through as well. And that's probably left another big question on, if what I'm doing today, is that going to work tomorrow? And that's this kind of search for the formula for the new ecosystem. And I think lucky enough for us at Oracle, contextual intelligence has been more relevant than ever because of that. So we've been really pleased that we've been able to ongoing keep supporting our agencies and brands because of that uncertainty, to really nail or expose custom brand suitability and really think about their choices as well. I think as Nicola suggested before, there is choices, and let's think about those choices, test and learn to really find out what's working for us in the new world.
And I think this is a very good positive spirit, right? About choices and test and learn. I think also adding to what you just said, the insecurity of the past year, but also the beginning of this year, also paid into programmatic as a channel. Because you could, with hands on keyboard, react quite fast to all the developments that you just described, and I think that's just another plus for having programmatic channels available and being very flexible and can react on all these trends.
So I think from my perspective, I think the pandemic really sped up advertisers' demand for outcome-driven solutions. And they've really wanted to extract the maximum value from the budgets that they've got available. And so I think one of the things that's been quite important for us this year is to make sure that we're guiding and selecting the right channels, the right campaign types and KPIs to make sure that advertisers are achieving the results that they want now, but also in the future. And I think one thing that's been an interesting observation, which kind of I think Daniel did touch upon, is that it doesn't necessarily mean getting the same for less. It means getting the maximum value from the budget that they have. So overachieving and really delivering value from there. And I think if we look a bit more internally, I think one thing that everyone probably globally can recognise is that we've had to adapt our approach to supporting our people. Programmatic is a really fast-paced kind of industry. There's always new things. We always need to educate our teams. So that's been like a really big focus, and adapting how we train, how we onboard, the innovation forums that we've run. I think we have put a lot of energy and effort into these things, and we've actually found that it's been really successful. It's created actually new opportunities. I think today potentially is also another good example of that, because I think we probably do have people here today on the webinar that maybe wouldn't have been able to join if it was a kind of event in person. So I think it's definitely been a brilliant learning experience for everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone. I definitely agree with those statements. So just following on from Nicola's comments about talent development and retention this year, does the panel have any additional comments on how the pandemic working environment has actually impacted this?
Yeah, I completely agree with Nicola on the internal perspective. So at the best of times, certainly in a world of digital, programmatic, training, developing, onboarding the best talent to do the best things is always a challenge in its own. So having to manage running your business, and in our case, we were actually merging company, creating a new business whilst exploring and benefiting from the growth that Daniel alluded to towards the back end of the year. So again, changing that approach to be really focused on how do you train people, how do you develop, how do you check back on that? How do you give them access to development opportunities if you're a relatively flat company? How do you try and involve more people more often? Because obviously we all work remotely, and that level of atomization makes it difficult to foster that sense of culture and community and the usual things that would go with working in your different offices. So I think that kind of, how do you create collective experiences to enable people to develop their careers better? A lot of how we would normally focus stuff is in the outside world, through events like this where you get to meet people, listen to people. That's changed. And then there's the external view where we've continued to support, been a long time supporter of things like Bricks and Finishing School, which is aimed at underrepresented 18 to 25-year-olds who have been disproportionately hit by the pandemic in terms of opportunities to get into our industry. So I think it's that mix of what can you do internally that nourishes and develops and is mindful of the kind of work-life balance for people. And we've had to do things differently, and we've made some mistakes. And I apologize now for everyone I've onboarded during this. It's not perfect, and we'll get there. Hopefully won't need to, but I'll just say that on record. I apologize. It's not been as good as it possibly could be. We're learning. I think all of us are learning. And I think the external view, we forget that there are impacts outside of our own companies to the people we want to have represent a wider, more diverse industry. And we need to work extra hard to bring them back into the fold.
Yeah, so even I think getting talent to our industry and on board talent is also a very interesting aspect, which will be, I think, also impacted by the pandemic. When you look at Germany, we have buyers all over the place. It's not like all the buyers and agencies and trading desks are located in London. And it was always a question, okay, where do we open up offices? Where do we attract people? And I think this has now really changed. This has changed with the pandemic. We are more flexible. That being said, it's still the wealth of face-to-face meeting is now even more evident. So we are looking at different recruiting strategies also to involve the groups that you just mentioned, which were underprivileged during the pandemic. And I think this is also a very important aspect, although we talk about machines and programmatic and algorithms here, not to undermine the human aspect also in the recruiting.
Yeah, I think we're all learning, aren't we, Gregor and Steve? I think certainly agree with everything we've said about just the consciousness of internal development, looking after the people that are in our businesses now, whether that be through culture, through education, training, and just nurturing talent. But I think actually the hardest thing is recruiting as well. So recruiting people and candidates that you may not be able to meet face to face, I think is a super interesting dynamic as well. And I think, is it making us ask different questions of candidates as well? Are we still looking for the same attributes in people as before? Is there a change in what we're expecting and asking candidates? So do they need the same background? Do they need to come from what we would say traditionally background in digital or media or marketing or advertising? Does it mean that we can be a little bit more open to other industries coming into ours as well? And also things like, are you self-motivated? Do you like working independently? These wouldn't normally be very standard questions. It would probably be more opposite, wouldn't it? Given how open we are as an industry around engagement and networking, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have good Wi-Fi? Is that a valid question now? So I think some of this is probably just raising a bit more of a spotlight on the way we bring people in as well.
Thanks, everyone. Definitely agree. So now just shifting over and looking at opportunities, what are the driving factors increasing programmatic spend this year? And why did we perform better in 2020 than anticipated? Andreas, did you want to start?
Yeah, I think we said some of it, but we've seen a real increase in the appetite for innovation. This kind of area around portfolio approaches or widening my execution strategies, maybe not using same tactics that I used previously, pre-pandemic or pre-cookieless ecosystem. We've really seen a call out from our customers to keep pushing the boundaries specifically and to try and find new areas of finding audiences, finding moments and finding connections. And I think there's a real curiosity, which I think is really healthy. And that could be across the use of universal IDs or audience cohorts, contextual signaling. These are all new types of execution and strategy that we're all trying to evolve and embed into our ecosystem as well. And that's similarly on the media side as well, whether that be through the rise of CTV, gaming as well as a huge spotlight on gaming at the moment as well too. So I think there's certainly for me a lot of growth could be coming from this general kind of influx of curiosity and testing, which I think is really healthy for us all.
So I think from my perspective, I think one of the biggest benefits of programmatic, which Daniel did talk about, is the flexibility that it provides. So I think it is flexible and it does allow advertisers to turn up spend and to dial their spends down. But I think further than that, the flexibility that programmatic offers is you can use programmatic creative so that you can adapt and tailor your creative messaging quickly. And I think that, as well as many other factors, has been really important over the last year, because the rapidly changing scenarios that we're dealing with kind of in different markets, it's meant that it's been really important to make sure that message remains relevant, and that people seeing the creatives, it actually resonates with them, as opposed to it being, okay, well, that was relevant 2 months ago or last month, but this month we need something different, because it has been so quick. And I think coupled with the ever expanding kind of the channels and formats and different strategies that can be deployed in programmatic now, means that it's more appealing than ever for clients to tap into.
Yeah, I would just follow on from and agree with everything that Nick has just said. I'm loath to call it the year of programmatic last year, but I think I just did. This rise of automation as the preferred way to buy and sell digital advertising formats safely, transparently, effectively, efficiently. They just continue to accelerate over this period, as we saw in all the figures that Daniel showed. And we're seeing it in people's earnings results throughout the industry. And I think there's probably three key areas that you distill it into. There's a lot of work over lots of years, and Daniel referenced it a bit. We talked about ads.txt, sellers.json. There's been a number of initiatives that have been designed specifically to instill greater trust and transparency in the marketplace. Secondly, we've touched upon talent development, but there's been a big investment now in people and skills and product. And we've grown knowledge and capabilities. I think overall raised the bar for what standards are for in terms of expectations and execution. Lots of stuff to make it safer, real investment in people and skills and resource and knowledge and expertise. And finally, as Nicola referenced, you can align that now with scaled premium supply across all channels, all formats and all geographies. So yeah, I think there are lots of reasons why programmatic just continues, or the use of automation just continues to drive growth. And those are just a few of them.
Thanks, everyone. What have you guys been most excited about? What channels or formats we think will continue to increase the programmatic investment?
I think we said it multiple times here. It's definitely CTV. Also for Rakuten TV, it was a great year in terms of usage, but also of the programmatic buying. But we also, that's definitely a new trend, but we also should not forget about a very old trend, mobile. So also 2020 and 21 was the year of this device, mobile. So every year is a mobile year. But in the lockdown, I think that this device and services on this device has even more and bigger importance for the users, for the people who chatted with, not only playing games, but also chatted with their loved ones, and also therefore for the advertisers. So I think using this channel on ad-supported messages like Facebook Messenger or Rakuten Viber is also something that we will see in 2021 and going forward. It's as important device, so to speak, and channel, programmatic channel, as the smart TV device. So I think these are the two, let's say, in-app channels that I'm really excited about.
I have to be slightly biased, but I think it's valid to talk a little bit about why we're excited about the re-rise maybe of contextual. I think, we saw it in Daniel's piece, and we're seeing a lot in the press at the moment. We're obviously coming straight from Oracle as well, but we are actually really excited about the new use cases. And I think I heard it really, I just like the term, it's not your mother's context, which I thought was really interesting. Or I've been using context from the 80s, but I think we really are starting to see a maturity in that particular vertical. And I think there is certainly a piece around the fact that not one channel will be the new solution for the new ecosystem, but we do truly believe that there's going to be a really important part for contextual to play in that. And that's really about allowing advertisers and agencies to bring their own metrics and data into that to really augment the use cases as well. And first party is super aligned with that. So it's a kind of a mixed answer around first party and what we can do around kind of augmenting and contextual as well. I think the rise of new players, the rise of some really interesting companies coming into the space is super exciting as well. I think it's exciting to see the confidence in investment. I think we've seen some really high profile movers and shakers at the moment in EMEA. So congratulations to Steve as an example. There's been quite a bit in the press at the moment that we've seen some really good confidence coming back in to our programmatic ecosystem from an investment point of view. And I think that's also super, super healthy. So yeah, they're probably my areas.
So for me, I think everyone probably recognises video, but one channel that I don't think has been mentioned so far is audio. And so I think digital audio is a great medium for that one-to-one interaction. There's more and more audiences available on more devices. And I think the main reason that we've seen the surge in popularity, people at home during lockdown, they're obviously listening to more content. But also I think, unlike some of the mediums, the content production continued, it wasn't affected, and it's thrived regardless of the lockdown restrictions. So I think audio is one to watch for me too.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I'd agree. I mean, I'm pretty excited about all formats. We're an omni-channel SSP, so we're seeing growth in a range of formats and channels. And as Nicola said, CTV we've called out. Areas like display, benefiting from better creative and programmatic. Areas like audio, which has been mentioned, that kind of unique one-to-one immersive experience made ever smarter by data. That's really compelling, really interesting, and seeing great growth there. And someone's put a Q&A, we might not have a chance to get to it in this live session around digital out of home. I would just say they have certainly not been sleeping in the last year. So I'm basically optimistic and excited for the role of all channels, all formats, and the role that programmatic will play in that.
Thanks, guys. We do only have a few minutes left. And as we are almost midway through 2021, what do we expect the industry to be focusing on, and what are the top priorities for your business?
Okay, I'll kick off. I'll be really quick. I think growing the CTV meaningfully in EMEA and helping partners navigate all the shift to post third party cookie world. So connected TV opportunity in EMEA is right now, and it's very real. We're really focused on that and staying committed to a true omni-channel execution at scale programmatically. But connected TV presents a unique opportunity now. And on the identity front, we think there's a lot of clarity to be found in all the noise. A lot of collaboration is needed, a mixed identity regime with logged in users, publisher-driven audience segments, and browser-based auctions. We think are really exciting. We're doing lots of great working groups looking at various ways in which we can drive some of those forward. So if you're interested, anyone, bad plug, but come speak to us.
Yeah, so I think what Andreas said, that the contextual targeting will be important, and to do this, we will focus, on content. If you have to have the right content on all different platforms to create the right context, but at the same time, of course, we will work on an identity solution, having this also available to clients, and I think there will be a nice mixture of both signals coming our way. And in the meanwhile, it's all about educating the CTV buyer and the TV buyer about this new CTV space. So for me, I think this year is Xaxis' 10-year anniversary. So it's a big milestone for us, and we'll be celebrating that throughout 2020. Some of the things that we're going to be doing is creating thought starters on 10 key trends that we think all marketers should be thinking about. So topics like AI and what role that plays in the industry, rise of gaming and how that becomes an opportunity, e-commerce, how that has the biggest impact. And I think to the question in the chat box, how we make the most of the boom in digital out of home. I think if I was going to focus on kind of two of those, I would say AI. It is integrated into every industry, but the application of data and talent to the algorithmic models that we're using will set some of us apart. And I think how we connect that with good creative execution and make the most of the different signals that we can pass into the algorithms and link that to great creative.
So I'll just try and round that off. I think a lot of what everyone said can also point towards what we're seeing towards a convergence of tech and martech. I think that's happening quicker than maybe we expected. So there's certainly an acceleration that's probably pushed by legislation and privacy. So supporting brands and agencies to make the most of known audiences from marketing assets, and then through the use of AI, machine learning, and other areas of operational integration, bring that into the programmatic world so it can be more tactically used to execute for targeting and measurement. I think is certainly more of a high level priority for us. I think more of a day-to-day or a second piece on that, for a short-term point of view is really, again, educating and supporting agencies and brands to navigate the new ecosystem through brand suitability, planning insights, which I think is really important, media quality, and generally robust targeting solutions in a cookieless ecosystem.
Great. Thank you all so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm going to hand this back over to David.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and thank you all for an incredible panel discussion and for sharing your insight into the European programmatic advertising landscape. It's greatly appreciated.